Hello, my name is Rahimeh Ramezany. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation on veiling in Orthodox Christianity and Islam. Today, I have with me a very special guest. C is an Orthodox Christian who veils as a part of her religious faith, and I am so happy and interested to hear about her story and to share it all with you. So with that, I will turn it over to C really quickly to introduce herself, and then we'll get into some questions.
My name is C. Obviously, that's not my quote unquote real
Internet
name.
safety.
It's my internet name. I am an Orthodox Christian. Um, I am a convert to Orthodoxy. I've been Orthodox for about 2.5 years. Um, so
Mm,
I have a little bit of imposter syndrome because um, I'm sure you know
mm,
people who are raised in the community versus people who the community. But I started a TikTok last year in February, and I ended up talking about veiling as a
mm,
Christian. That turned out to be my niche, and I kind of blew up in a way I didn't expect.
mm,
Because I was just doing it for fun and to
mm,
find a community online, and so I'm gonna do my
mm.
best to represent Orthodox.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. And
here we
please,
go.
like, this is a place where, I believe in God, you believe in God. Like, this is a place where hopefully the listeners, when I do my other diversity, equity, inclusion work, when I'm talking to a mixed audience, I do filter out and code switch some of like the more religious language. But hopefully the folks watching this today can acknowledge that the two speakers are people who, are expressing their religious identity. And part of that is believing in God. So please don't like flinch at the like acknowledgement of, the elephant in the room, if you will, for some folks. So that's really, really interesting. And honestly, I think that's something that's so powerful about social media is that for a lot of us, I know myself very much included, those of us who go through parts of our life feeling kind of on the outskirts do tend to gravitate towards social media for a sense of community because the algorithms, for good or for bad, like bring us in connection with other people who resonate with that message. Sometimes people who like very much don't resonate with that message, which can be very difficult to put up with sometimes, but also very much people who feel seen and needed to hear like our own experiences. And I know for myself, as a Muslim woman who does wear, a veil, I resonate so much with what you're saying and how your content puts out like humbly, but being very like strong in your identity and not apologizing and not like also going so far as being in everyone's face, which I think is a negative stereotype that a lot of non-religious folks have about religious people. And I'm not saying that that's not necessarily like based in some accuracy, but at the same time, like, anyway, balance. So with that, I would love if you don't mind giving us just a little bit of an overview of Orthodox Christianity for those of us who may not be as familiar.
I mean, I'm going to address most of what I'm saying to what I
For
assume
sure.
is a primarily American audience,
Mm,
because and of course because that's the environment I live in, right?
mm,
That's mostly my experience. People who haven't really heard of these other sects of Christianity may be more
mm,
familiar with the term Eastern Orthodoxy. Community itself, we really don't call it Eastern Orthodoxy, because I mean, we just like we're in the West. Why
yeah.
would we call ourselves East? It doesn't make sense. Uh, but then also, like for me personally, and I know for a couple of other people I've talked to, the term Eastern Orthodoxy kind of plays into
Mm,
this Orientalism that a lot of West have, where it's I think it's unconscious for the most part. I mean,
mm,
certainly some people can use it to demonize any faith that um, has
mm,
roots in the Middle
mm.
East or the Far East, but the term Eastern Orthodoxy kind of
Yeah.
has a connotation of ooh,
Mm.
it's kind of otherizing. Um, we we are Christians. We are actually the second largest
Wow.
Christian church in the world. The Roman Catholic. Yeah. The Roman Catholic Church is the first largest. Um, Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church
Mm-hmm.
split in the year 1054. We call it the Great Schism. So people who are familiar with Roman
Mm.
Catholicism will probably see a lot of things if they go to a
Mm.
service that's familiar. Um, but
Mm.
ironically, because I come from a Protestant background, I was raised very Calvinist.
Mm.
It's pretty legalistic. Like you're not allowed really to have
Oh,
images
okay.
of anything. It's very, very, think
Oh, okay.
Puritan, and that,
No, I appreciate you
yeah,
explaining that a little bit more of those details.
you're
I'm
good.
not personally as familiar with all the different sects of Christianity, so I really love like yeah, giving that extra context. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Is there's so
Sure.
many like brands or denominations of Christianity. It's
Sure.
hard to navigate all that. Protestantism
Mm.
was a split from the Roman
Mm.
Catholic Church about 500 or so. Uh, Coming from a Protestant background, ironically, a lot of the issues that Protestants have with Roman Catholicism are also
Oh.
theological issues that Orthodox have with Roman Catholicism. And about 500 years before the
Mm. Mm.
Protestants,
Mm.
rebelled, we were
Mm.
that was the split that happened. So, um, it's not is not to say that
Mm.
we like hate each other. We don't. We
Mm.
are all brothers and sisters in Christ. Or at least we consider ourselves that way. Um, we just think that we have
Yeah.
the straight line of apostolic succession, not succession.
English
Uh,
is such a fun language.
that's not right. I know, right? And the deep
Yeah.
south, I'm like, oh no, not no. um, but
Mm.
we and the Catholics can do this too. You can trace your priests and your bishops all the way back
Mm.
through history to the first apostles of Jesus Christ, first to the teachings of Christ Himself. Um, Eastern Orthodoxy. If you see an Eastern Orthodox person in like quote unquote in the wild,
Yeah.
one of the things one of the things that would probably tip you off is
Mm.
they might be wearing an Orthodox cross. Uh, this is probably the most recognizable symbol. Um, there's a lot of history behind why the cross is shaped this
Mm.
way. I don't even really understand it all to be, but I do like that wearing the
Mm.
Eastern Orthodox cross, like it differentiates me, but I don't think it makes it so in like an
Mm.
oppressive way. It's something that's like simple, and it
Yeah.
allows us to kind of recognize each other too, like because a lot of times Orthodox, um,
Mm.
and Jews and Muslims too, like Middle Eastern
Mm.
religions, we like to pass the peace. So we like to say, be
Mm.
unto you,
Yeah.
or greet each other with a kiss, something like that. I'm not personally a huge
Yeah. Yeah.
fan of other people's mouths near my face, but but
Yeah.
it is what it is. It's nice to have that recognition. Something that they uh, may have seen, like maybe in the news or in a blog, is Orthodox have closed
Mm.
communion. So what that means is, of course, communion is we take,
Mm. Mm.
the bread and the wine. It's symbolic, but it's
Mm.
also not. Um,
Sure.
that gets into belief, but in the Catholic Church and in a lot of Protestant churches who also do communion, you can
Mhm.
just go in and take communion. But Orthodox Church, sometimes people get offended because we
Oh.
don't do that. The priest will actually, if he doesn't know you, he will
Oh.
actually refuse communion to you, because the
Mm.
way that we
Mm.
think about communion, there's a letter that St. Paul wrote where he said, some of
Mm.
you are taking this really lightly. Because of
Mm.
that, some of you have fallen asleep, right? Which is a metaphor for, hey, you didn't, you weren't serious about
Mm.
this,
Mm.
and it affected your life, like you died. So And that's why when I go to another church, I won't take communion at that church either,
Mm.
because of my belief about communion. It's it's a responsibility of the priest,
Mm.
and I wouldn't put that,
Mm.
like, that priest doesn't know me. I don't want it would also
Mm.
be a
Mm.
sin for me to put that onto him. Um, and even Orthodox are not supposed to take communion
Mm.
if we haven't been to confession. So it's very, like, it's a lot more stratified as far as, well, maybe stratified's not the right word, but
Okay.
it's a lot more cut and dry as far as
Yeah.
what's allowed and what's not. I think, let's see, as far as basic beliefs, if you look up the
Mm.
Nicene Creed, we recite
Mhm.
every Sunday at liturgy. Uh, you have to look up the Eastern Orthodox version, which we consider is the original version. One of the reasons that um, one of the reasons that
Mm.
Catholicism and Orthodoxy split is because the Pope
Mm.
decided to add something in there, and the rest of
Yeah.
Christendom was like, "Pardon?" So, if you want our theological beliefs, the
Mm.
Nicene Creed encapsulates them very well. We believe
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. We believe that Jesus Christ
Mm. Mm.
came, took on flesh, had the Son and God,
Mm.
completely one and completely the other,
Mm.
came to save us from um,
Mm. Mm.
from destruction. When we talk about salvation, it's a little bit different than most of cultural
Mm.
Christians in the U.S. will be familiar with. We
Oh,
call it
okay.
theosis. Uh, it is, if you translate the Greek,
Yeah.
which what the gospel generally written in, the word is not
Mm.
been saved. It's not a past
Mm.
tense.
Mm.
It's being. We consider salvation a balance of faith and work. So faith
Mm.
working through you. So there must
Mm.
be necessarily a change in behavior, right? They say by their fruit. And theosis is the Holy Spirit working through you and you doing to
Mm. Mm.
become more like God, not
Mm. Mm.
becoming more like God. And it's really, it can be really annoying because you see, like, the bad
Yes.
apples get the
Oh my
most coverage.
gosh, yes. Like,
Start
so
talk-
the loudest people are usually like the most wrong, and they get the most attention as well because they're being so outlandish, right? So inherently, like, human beings are like, "Oh my god, what is that?" So it's a natural thing to have our attention caught by things that are like really outlandish and sensationalistic, and the media definitely uses that to its advantage to, sell. I mean, they don't sell papers anymore, but like eyeballs on articles and videos and stuff
yeah.
like that. But there are so many people who are just living quote unquote normal lives as a member of their faith, who are not like not doing anything so sensationalist to draw attention to their lived experience. And this is a huge reason why I wanted to do these kinds of conversations with different members of different religious communities, to normalize people of different faiths, different sects of different faiths, just living normal lives. I truly believe that there are people of all different religious and non-religious identities who don't even know what they don't know, and when presented with information are more than happy to be inclusive and understanding and sensitive to the needs and wants and accommodations of other people. And again, they literally just don't know. And so going out of our way to like put forward our presence, just to be like, hey, we literally exist, and yeah, we don't make a big stink about our existence, but that's the point of like not shoving our existence in your face all the time. Like, we're just living our
Mm.
lives like normal human beings. But because of that, all the like extremists or the obnoxious people, at best, like at best they're just obnoxious, are making themselves known, and like they're making themselves the face of our religion. And then when we identify ourselves in, as you said, the wild, people will look at us like, oh my god, you're one of those people. Like, no, 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 we're embarrassed about them too. No, we don't like them either.
I know, like, when I'm sure you've heard of the
Yeah.
Westboro Baptist Church. When I was Baptist, like, I was surprised that more people weren't like, "Hey,
Yeah.
hey, no, 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 no. Why are you co?" Most Baptists
Yeah.
don't believe that at all. Don't act like that, and don't
Yeah.
teach their kids to act like that. And it's just, yeah. And then when people, get online, they feel like
Yeah.
they can say anything with no consequence. We're getting,
Y- Yeah.
oh Lord,
Yeah.
or
Oh my
docs.
gosh. The internet is a
Um,
wild, wild, wild place. With that, I want to transition us to veiling. Can you share in the Orthodox Christian perspective specifically, what is like the concept of veiling for you all?
so I did bring a few of my icons, and then for all of my bibliophiles out there who might actually be
Mm,
interested about the often
mm,
misunderstood
mm,
passages in the New Testament. This is an excellent book. It's called Paul and Gender. It's by Dr. Cynthia Long Westfall. She has a really good explanation of what was actually going on
mm,
in the New Testament when they're talking about veiling. So, for some historical context, the even when Jesus was alive, the Romans had
mm,
conquered just about all of the known world. Right? Hellenistic culture was a big force.
mm,
I mean, it's like
mm,
American culture today, right? And um, we talk about people becoming
mm,
Americanized. Well, that was big stressors in Jewish culture at the time, was keeping our Jewish identity,
mm,
not
mm,
becoming Hellenized. About um, about Roman culture is that only high class and quote unquote off limits
mm,
women were
mm,
allowed to um the in fact, like, prostitutes would actually just uncover their hair
mm,
like that.
mm,
That was their
mm,
sign they're working. So when Paul says to the churches, and let's remember that these are letters that are not written to
mm.
us in modern times. These are Paul didn't think they were going to be publicized. They're written
Yeah.
to individual churches to the individual concurrent issues.
Like someone reading your
And
text
one
messages
of
to
the
someone and you were
issues,
like, dude, this was not meant, this was private.
yes, yes, yeah, it's yeah, or someone opening your mail, and if it's an inspiring letter,
Yeah.
sure, like, spread it around,
Yeah.
but please do that after. Yes. But the the churches, especially in Corinth, and where Paul's acolyte Timothy
Mm, mm,
was ministering, issue with women that
mm,
were lower class. Everyone was allowed to worship
mm,
together, all classes. Paul said, there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free,
mm, mm,
complete equality. When lower class women would cover their
mm,
heads because, like, hey, I'm trying to worship, working, that was creating an issue with the men. It was actually a symptom of
mm.
patriarchy that the men were trying to let these women cover their hair. Imagine that. Um, so Paul is saying, "Hey, no, you have to respect all women equally because we are all equal in the sight of God. So you're going to
Yeah.
let the women cover their hair. You're going to let the women dress the way that they want to dress. They want to
Mm,
be
mm,
respectful to God. So you do that. You can't
mm,
disallow them from doing that." And so a lot of stuff in the Orthodox Church, we don't necessarily see it as like a be all end all. There are women in my temple who
mm,
never veil,
mm, mm,
like, at all. And it's not in American Orthodox churches. It's not
mm.
necessarily mandatory. We do scarves on, like, in we come in. There are some scarves.
Oh,
If you forgot
nice.
one, you can just cover. Yeah, it is really,
Yeah.
it's really accommodating. Um, but the I see it actually racial divide there. A lot of the women that are my mother's age, so like
Mm,
second
mm.
wave feminism,
Yeah.
they're like, "Nah, I'm never my hair." A lot of the younger women, even like the younger women do it, and then, like, they
Yeah.
teach their little children how to do it. They
Yeah,
rolls
yeah.
with their cute little veils. A lot of them veil, so it's not like
Mm,
it's not
mm,
a be all end all. You don't veil
mm,
a certain way. My best usually just wears like a scarf
Oh,
headband,
okay.
and it has it's not like for me, I like my hair to be
Mm-mm.
completely covered. I don't tendrils. I just think for me, I think I look ridiculous
Yeah.
like that. I don't find it for me, I do not
Mm-mm.
find it respectful. I don't think I would not be respectful if I were to
Mm.
come to church dressed like that.
Yeah.
Judgment on any other woman who goes to church like that. And then veiling to a different
Mm-mm.
degree outside. Some don't veil at all. Some women, I would say the majority of American women only veil
Mm.
inside the temple. Uh, some women like me need the reminder that I belong to somebody greater than myself. I
Mm-mm.
belong to him and I need it. And so
Mm.
I need this crutch when I'm out. So some women, like
Mm.
myself, veil full time. Uh, not when we veil, like when I said we don't have a specific style, like even in our icons,
Yeah.
like this one is my Mary, the Mother of God uh, icon. I mean, we can see that Mary is almost always depicted wearing a veil. There's really, and that's
Mm.
just holy tradition. We put a lot of stock into what we see as knowledge that has been
Mm-mm.
passed down to us. Revere the Gospels. They are the good news. I mean, if you saw part of our liturgy, like we walk around,
Yeah.
with the Gospels, but it would also be remiss of us to discount the many, 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 many people who have
Mm.
lived the faith that were apostles or that weren't, you know, chroniclers that made it
Mm.
into the first century. It doesn't stop there. So even like this is my patron
Yeah.
saint, Saint Syncletica. Um, she's wearing a different type of headdress because um, it was a
Yeah.
different time and it was a different. She was in a different
Mm-mm.
social strata, and when we veil, we try not to be legalistic about it. What we say is we just encourage
Mm.
being respectful. So on that, my um, my church's temple, they have signage that says, we ask that you speak
Mm. Mm.
softly, don't have idle talk. This is a house of worship. We do ask that you
Mm.
dress modestly. Orthodox services, you will see a lot
Mm.
of bowing, a lot of
Mm.
cross ourselves in front of the um and it's sometimes we
Yeah.
prostrate ourselves. So dress a certain way, like I think you're going to be a little uncomfortable just personally, but it's all about what you personally feel
Yeah.
convicted to do. And long as we don't, I feel like I'm kind of rambling here, but as long as we don't use it like we would use anything, as long as we don't
Mm.
use the cross as an excuse to judge in others, as long as we don't use the veil or our modest dress,
Mm.
like we are told in Paul's letters, we are told by the saints that they've left writings that it is
Mm.
humility. When we're talking in church, we say sinners of whom I am first. So and even like I love Saint Syncletica. She said, I don't know if you can see, but it says one of her most famous quotes is, "You cannot be saved without
Mm.
humility."
That's beautiful.
And so, um, especially having such a visible
Mm.
sign of who you are, it does inspire you to
Mm.
act differently. Uh, you're on
Mm.
the stage, right? Time you go out, and while we are individuals, we're also representing something greater than ourselves. And I think for me personally, it's been
Mm.
useful for me to have this very visible symbol that I am a
Mm.
religious woman. I am reminded that I
Yeah.
got to act like it. I I need to be understanding. I need to be
Mm.
calm and not roll. So, as with anything else that we do in the Orthodox Church, veiling is supposed to be a sign of our
Mm,
obedience to God, our honor to God, and then how it's supposed to reflect Him
yeah.
to others.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm just sitting here like in awe. There's so much I identify. Like everything you're saying, I identify so much with, of humility and modesty, and like in action, in words, and how we conduct ourselves, reminding ourselves that yes, we, as you said, are individuals but are also part of a collective human experience, a part of a religious community. And if we, and yeah, if we want to represent our faith, our belief, our, way of believing in God and a creator in a religious practice through actions, right? That people look at us and see our good behavior and how kind we are and how humble we are. And I think that I've seen a lot of kind of pushback against like humility in a lot of spaces, because I think it has been weaponized in a way.
Yeah, sometimes people will take humility, it'll be false
False
humility.
humility, like never trying for greatness, in the sense of like never trying to accomplish anything great or make progress in the world or help your community in a way that does happen to be on a stage or is, through leadership or something like that. And I don't think of it so much that way, as much as not like keeping your ego in check, making sure that
Hmm.
you are reminded that all of our favors in life, all of the good things coming into our lives, are from a higher power for which we are grateful, and not being so individualistic or egotistical to allow ourselves to be our own icon, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the thing is, when we talk about make us
Mm,
stand
mm,
out and make
mm.
us different, and see that as
Yeah.
attention seeking. And I'm like, trust me, we're women, we get enough attention. But it's not, and for some women, I'm sure, you know, everyone's struggle
Sure.
is their own. You know, and we can kind of tell who's trying to get the attention, because they'll do things that, frankly, in the Christian community, I'm like, well, that's not
Mm, mm,
Christ-like.
mm.
All right, but just because we've decided to put on something outwardly doesn't mean that the how do I say it? Like, it's not a
Yeah.
performance. It's something that's supposed to be reflected
Mm,
internally. Um, that's um, that's one thing I think that people, uh, when the Protestant Reformation
mm,
happened, uh, Martin Luther, who he nailed the 95 Theses to the wall. He actually used to be a monk,
mm.
and his wife used to be a nun. They actually have a
Oh,
great
really?
love story, by the way.
I'll look into it.
Anyone wants to go check out, it's really funny. Talk about girl boss. Um, but when he actually wanted to revise the canon and take out the book of James, because it talked about how works are so important to show that you're a
Mm,
Christian. Because one of the about Protestantism is they call them the five solas, um, and one of them is sola fide, which means faith alone. And it sounds very, very good when, like, oh yeah, I'm saved by faith alone, but then it leads to this idea that, okay, well, as long as you have faith, you can do whatever you
mm,
want. That is not something in Orthodoxy, that's anathema. We don't think that way. Um, your faith is not an excuse for you to go do whatever you
mm,
want. Your should be almost a holy burden to you,
mm,
that you now you know better, for
mm,
real. And idea of where you relate to everything in the
mm,
universe, and to not put yourself down with to think that you're too
Mm.
lowly because you were put in reason. Like you do have to fulfill your
Mm.
purpose. You are giving gifts. But on the other hand, you're so cosmically unimportant.
Yeah.
There is no so
It's definitely a
it's constantly a
balance.
balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's okay with
Mm.
balance. I think one of the especially in American Christianity that we run into is the scientific method applied to
Mm.
religion. Um, when we talk about, um, like, oh, and I'm sure you see this in your faith discussions as well. Like, oh, what does this one
Yeah.
word mean? Like, is this real, the real translation? It, the thing is, we don't live in those
Mm.
times. So fully understand the context. We can only go by what people who lived there
Mm.
wrote about
Mm.
it, what
Mm.
they told, etc. So there is no way for us to really scientifically break down our
Yeah.
holy books. I don't think that that's productive. What matters is that we live out our faith in relation to other
Mm.
people. And if this helps me
Yeah.
do that by reminding that I have to
Mm.
represent, like I have to represent, then I think to see it as performative, it
Yeah.
misses the point.
Yeah. And with that, I would really love to ask you kind of a more down to earth, like practical question. Yeah. Let's get to one.
Uh, it-
Oh,
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
before we move on, just one thing maybe to insert in
Oh,
the
sure.
first part. Um, what this is what we call an icon, and if you go to someone who's Orthodox, if you go to their home and you don't know they're Orthodox, and you see this type of
Mm.
style, this is what most people think of when they think of Eastern Orthodoxy. Um, we don't do
Mm.
sculptures like the Roman. This is the style.
Okay. So it's not just what they think of, but also like that would be an accurate like indication that you're in an Orthodox.
Yeah, we put icons up in our home. We try to put them so that when we
Mm. Mm.
pray, we're facing. Um, and the this is actually the oldest a copy of the oldest extant depiction of
Mm.
Jesus. And it always strikes me as funny when people are like, "Oh, all the icons look white." I'm like, "Oh, you realize most of the American saints are Aleutian. Jesus was not
Yeah.
a white man." Like, but
Uh,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate that. And I wanted to ask you about an experience in the workplace that you've had related to veiling. This is something that in my own work, talking about Muslim inclusion in workplaces and universities, for those who do choose to wear hijab or the Muslim version of veiling, that comes up a lot. And it's really important for me to have an intersectional approach, that the work that I do and other DEI folks are doing is not to do, not in the pursuit of just our own community, that these inclusion practices and equitable practices benefit everyone. So with that, tying in your own experience, asking for a workplace accommodation related to your headscarf, do you mind sharing that with the listeners?
yeah. So I am law enforcement,
Mm.
and obviously wear a very specific
Mm.
uniform. And when I went into the academy, um, I did ask for a uniform exception. Not just to wear something over my hair, but also, when you're doing PT,
Mm.
they have you wearing and a
Oh.
t-shirt. I was the only girl, which meant that at some point there was likely to be a male holding my ankles while I did sit-ups, and I was not comfortable
Yeah.
with that. Um, so I did ask the head of the academy. I was like, "Listen, can I wear like leggings and a long sleeve shirt under it? Can I just cover my hair?"
Mm.
That basically you don't have an official uniform exception on the books. And I was like, "Well, that's because I'm not." actually at work yet, but
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And so we can't do that. But they did make an accommodation for me by always having a female instructor available.
Okay.
So I didn't have men looking down my shorts while I did sit-ups. So that was nice.
Small wins.
And yeah, small wins. And I graduated valedictorian and honors guard, by the
Wow,
way. So I was like,
congratulations. That's amazing.
thank you. And it turns out that those things matter when
Mm,
you're looking at shift availability.
yeah.
Anyway, uh, when I got to my assignment, where I was going to be working, I looked at the regulations and it said for any exceptions to the uniform, you have to submit a written request.
Mm,
It has to go through these. So I submitted a written request. And there were eh, obviously
mm,
bureaucracy takes a long time. In the meantime, I tried to wear my jacket whenever I
mm, mm,
could. I wore our hats, our official caps, and our
mm.
official covers whenever I could. And at some point, I was like, okay, this is not happening
Yeah.
fast. And
This isn't being
I actually did
prioritized.
cut off. Yeah. So I actually did cut off all my hair
Oh,
because I was like, listen, I need it to be able to be covered with a cap.
yeah.
And and yeah, that was a.
Wow.
But I think well because it taught me a lesson about my own vanity.
Yeah.
Um, so that was an experience.
Yeah.
And it showed me how much value I put in my hair, and maybe I should not be so proud of it. But about 6 months in, I got a call from not my immediate supervisor,
Mm.
not his. I got a call from our district
Wow.
supervisor, and during my work day. So I'm like, they're like, okay, hey, we need you to go take this call. And so I had to go into another office and take the
Yeah.
call. There was sitting there who was assigned to that office. He's sitting there listening to me basically get interrogated
Oh,
about why, as a Christian, we cover our hair. What does that mean? Like, what is this really a valid
at
belief?
work? This is a work
At,
person asking you
y-
about your beliefs.
yes.
Oh my God.
This is something that I've later learned can actually get you in trouble legally,
Seriously.
and because uh, you're not supposed to question if someone
No.
truly
No, you
holds
are
or
not.
not.
That is none of your
Um,
business.
supposed to be just a hey, I believe this. Okay, granted, as long as you conform to the standards that
It doesn't interfere with
I
your
don't
job in any way.
my job, right? Like I don't wear things like this to work,
Yeah.
because a lot of times, this is not conducive to breaking up fights,
Sure.
right? So I wear stuff that's close to my
Yeah.
head. Um, but it it was pretty uncomfortable. I was cold sweat and was not approved. It just stayed in limbo again. I thought like, okay, I've talked to him.
Mm.
Cool. All right. At least that's done with.
Yeah.
Um, no. About 10 or 11 months later, I was working with an older officer who was just a few years away from retirement. And so of
Mm.
course, you know, old grizzled veterans
Mm.
are they just
No
they'll
filter.
pass on the yeah, they'll pass on the nuggets to you,
Oh,
right? And I
nice.
was telling, hey, I'm really struggling here. And he said, I can't believe no one has told you that. Just you can do whatever you want. Get a letter from your
Mm,
priest,
mm, mm.
get them to sign it, and then you're golden.
Mm.
So it's the same way that you would do for like a medical exemption for something.
Yeah.
I'm like, cool. So I did that, and suddenly the very next day, it was signed, sealed, delivered, and started wearing. And the thing is, because it's a uniform exception, I think when we're talking about uniformed professions, I think that one of the concerns from people who are concerned about uniformity is that will it affect professionalism? Because if we have all of these uniform exceptions, the purpose of a uniform is to make everybody look the same, right? Which visually gives you like, oh, they're in the same uniform, they believe in the
Mm.
same things, they have purpose. Um, so I think I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt,
That is
right?
very kind.
I think, thank you. It took me it's been a couple of years,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it
You
took me
cooled off. Like, okay, okay.
time. But I can understand that concern. However, um, when you're asking for an exception, it's not like you don't know the requirements of the job.
Mm, mm.
One thing that I'm very happy with when I went through the academy is that there were no uh, like there were the job requirements. There was no separate test for man
Yeah.
or woman. You did if you could do this, if you
Mm,
could drag this person, if you could pass all of the requirements,
mm.
everybody was on the same page. And I think sometimes people don't consider that we know that when we're asking for a uniform exception, we're not asking to come in out of uniform.
Mm,
We're
mm.
asking with minor changes that would make our uniform also compliant with our religious
Yeah.
beliefs. Uh, we're talking about a diverse workforce
Yeah.
that actually works in. I've had conversations with people who have noticed that I cover my hair, that I wear long sleeves all the time,
Mm,
even in the
mm.
heat of summer. They come up and they're more comfortable talking to me than they would be talking even to my other female colleagues,
Mm,
because it's something that gives us a common point of
mm,
reference.
mm,
You know, even when they find out, oh hey, maybe I'm not sick,
mm, mm,
I'm not, but I'm religious, and
mm.
that gives us commonality.
Yeah.
From there, build rapport, which in law enforcement is very very important because that
Yeah.
keeps bad things from.
Yeah.
And so I think just a little bit more, I don't know, forward thinking as far as that goes would have been appreciated. I was told like, hey, try to keep it on the DL. We really don't want, but for basically
Mm.
for those reasons, right? Really, we don't want it to be any more of a stir. The district administrator said, you know that you're going to get a lot of attention for this, right? And I said, well, I get a lot of attention anyway.
Yeah.
That is something to deal with. When I started, I just wore a cap,
Mm, mm.
and I would wear my uniform cap over it, but my hair was completely covered, much like an undercap.
Yeah.
And I actually got my lieutenant pulled me aside one day and said, "Hey, um, so we've gotten a complaint that you're allowed to wear that on your head, and no one else is allowed to wear anything except the branded caps on their head. So would it be okay for you to just go back to wearing the cap?" And I looked at him and I said, and this is my direct supervisory. I was like, I don't know this, but I have a religious exemption. And he said, oh, like, and of course, and like that made him back off. Like he's a good loop. Like, oh my God, never mind. And I was like, you tell that person who complained to come talk to me directly rather than just complaining to the brass. And at that point, I realized, you know what? There's no point in trying to keep it on the DL.
Mm.
So out and I got myself a Nike sports job,
Yeah.
and I got up into work wearing that the next day. And like I had to
Nice.
take the label, right?
Sure,
But
sure.
and that's something that I think people like, especially Jews and Christians who maybe don't want don't want to wear a full veil, like they'll just wear the turban style, and even
Mm,
Muslims who would wear the turban
mm,
style,
mm, mm.
still valid as a head covering. But I think that's an issue that we tend to run into, is that, and I've seen videos on this where you'll go into places where hats are not allowed, and people will think it's a hat. People will think
Yeah,
it's a fashion. Um, so it is useful, and I hate to say it like this, but it's useful to have a recognized
yeah,
religious headdress that is not, like, it is seen immediately as religious. Because the moment I started wearing the sports hijab, right,
yeah,
and more complaints, and I thought that was interesting. I was like, why can't we just all get along? Like, I'm still doing
yeah.
my job, but
Yeah,
that's stuff that
that's my concern is like this from my perspective comes from a perspective that difference equals bad. And even to your point of it being in line with a uniform, I really believe that there can be a uniform for doctors and nurses and law enforcement and soldiers and all these other groups that have uniforms, yes, and also there can be exceptions for a myriad of reasons that are all legitimate because bad does not or diversity does not equal bad. Difference does not equal bad. There are people who have religious reasons of all different kinds of religions, as you mentioned, Jews and Muslims and Sikhs and all different kinds of religions that dress a different way. There are going to be people with disabilities or skin conditions who can't have the sun on them or who have rashes that they want to cover or wounds that are healing. What about people who are recovering from cancer and have caps or wigs or something on, like on and on and on, all of these different reasons. And the idea of like not allowing hats indoors, like what like actual legitimate purpose does that serve other than an old time rule that somehow it is disrespectful to wear a hat indoors? Like what legitimate, like tell me what about a hat, about covering your head, is actually disrespectful? Nothing. Unless
Mhm.
it's a matter of like, again, like you mentioned before, in your temple, in your church, there's an expectation of a certain dress code that's different. But in a egalitarian, multi-ethnic, multi-racial, multi-religious environment, which again in the United States, as we mentioned at the beginning, this I'm in the United States, born and raised in the United States, see as well as in the American context, like in our context in the United States, there is no official religion. You cannot force religion on other people, and you cannot force people to not practice their religion at the same time. So, in that context, in a public space where it's not a church, a mosque, a synagogue, a temple, whatever, what have you, of a religious community that does set their own dress standards for entering their space, there is absolutely no reason why people can't wear hats, why people can't wear head coverings. Again, if it has nothing to do with them performing their job. Like for instance, in a Muslim example, something that I saw like years ago was an article where there was a Muslim woman in this case, who was a flight attendant, and she sued the airline because they asked her as a part of her duties as a flight attendant to serve alcohol to the people in the plane, and it was against her religion to serve alcohol, be around alcohol, consume alcohol, and all that. For myself as another Muslim, I kind of sided with the airline because it's like, but you chose that job. A standard part of being a flight attendant is serving drinks to
Mhm.
the attendants on the plane, to the part what am I looking for? The passengers. Thank you. The passengers on the flight. That is a standard part of the job, and part of that is alcohol. That is like well known. So choosing the job that you do, if a part of that job inherently goes against your religion, then that is on you to choose, right? So for myself, I would not choose a job that inherently goes against my faith. That doesn't make sense to then ask to be included and given accommodations. But again, in these cases where you're covering your hair, where you're asking to not have to like have a man holding your ankles while you're wearing shorts, and you're like, this is really not a modest position for me, and they were able to make those accommodations anyway. That's like, I know you said that this is a couple years away, so you've cooled down a bit. This is like newer information for me, and especially like doing DI work, it just offends me so much that it really does not matter what is it that you're giving up by just allowing someone to practice their faith in a way that has nothing to do with you, that doesn't interfere with their work in any way. It's just from this such a deeply held belief that being different means bad and negative, which is just completely not the case.
And it I think it also speaks to a larger cultural problem. One
Mm,
issues that we have in law enforcement is mental health. Um,
mm,
there's a perception that to need mental health check-ins or
mm,
assistance in any way is
mm,
is weakness, and
mm,
not so much anymore, but some of the old guard will still, like, in positions of power, will still look at, oh, this person, that we're required to let them know if we're on certain medications, right? And so, like, oh, this person is
mm,
taking,
mm.
and well, obviously they can't handle it. And when it's exactly true, right? This person, if they're going to therapy, if they're taking medication, they are handling it. Like, that is
Exactly.
handle it. And I think this emphasis on uniformity to the point of effective anonymity is damaging not only to the
Yeah.
community at large, but it's also damaging to the people in the institution,
Mm.
because I mean, just look up,
It's an impossible task.
yeah, like, it's the same with EMTs and medical personnel.
Mm,
We're
mm.
first into something, like, not to get too into it, but like, I've had somebody with a drug overdose die in my arms before,
Ugh,
and the fact that, that there's this, ooh, I tell people that I needed to go see the therapist after that. Like, it's it
yeah.
contributes to the whole culture, and the
Yeah.
whole culture does need to change. It doesn't mean that
Yeah.
we're weak. Religion is not weakness. It's not a crutch. Some of the
Mm,
strongest people I've ever seen in my life were
mm,
deeply, deeply religious. So
mm,
there's this cultural phenomenon where if you're anything but mainstream,
mm.
er, then you must be weak in some way, and that's simply not the case.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. Oh, and I'm so
Are
sorry that you had that experience. No, thank you so much for sharing. This is things that we need to hear, that I want, especially employers, to hear around being inclusive of people from a very diverse group of identities. We don't all look the same. We don't all practice the same. We don't all live our lives the same. And that is okay. That's part of the beauty of the tapestry of human existence. And that's a huge part of my belief in, uplifting and sharing different people's stories. So, with that, I want to draw us to a close with a final question. Do you have any recommendations for organizations, universities, institutions, any and all groups on being inclusive of Orthodox Christians overall, whether including veiling or any other practices that usually stand out in your community as something that you have to struggle with asking for understanding or accommodations or something like that?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is, and this applies, I think, not to just the private sector or just the public sector or just
Mm-mm.
it can be applied just in general, is that when somebody comes to you and says, or in email, in writing, says, hey,
Mm,
I have this sincerely held belief,
mm, mm.
I need to do this, and I still will do my job to the best of my ability. I'm asking, how can we make this work? I'm asking for such.
Mm,
The first response should be, all right, like, okay.
yeah.
I would say
Let's
that,
make this work.
yeah, like, let's make this work. Especially in the American context, and specifically in the Christian context, a lot
Mm,
of Christians, there's this kind of cultural bias, when you see cultural Christianity in America, uh,
Mm.
especially like in the deep South where it's like Methodists, Baptists, Presbyterians. On the outside, they actually look quite a lot alike. And
Mm.
there's this tendency of Christians to think that everybody worships like them, or if you don't
Mm.
worship exactly like them, then it must not be real in some sense. That distrust, that like inherent other,
Mm.
um, I really don't know what to say other than like check that at the door.
Yeah.
But don't, I would say don't interrogate. There's a difference,
Mm.
and everybody, everyone reasonable knows there's a difference between asking questions from truly a place of curiosity and wanting to learn, and interrogating somebody from a position of skepticism or doubt. And
Yeah.
if someone comes to you
Or
with,
like an aha, like, haha, I caught you in whatever negative thing that I'm trying to point out about you.
yeah, or like making assumptions, because skepticism leads us to make assumptions, right? That's one of the things I can't stand is when
Mm.
people who are Protestant, not even high church, like low church, I'm not going to get into that, but people
Okay,
who
okay.
have like, they don't even have Christ on the cross in their church. They just have the cross. They're that iconoclastic, telling me that we worship saints. And I am like, first of all, don't tell me what I believe. Like,
Yeah.
don't tell me what I believe. I am telling you what I believe. It is
Yeah.
the height of rudeness
Mm.
to assume just because you don't understand the nuance of my faith doesn't mean that nuance does not exist. Um,
Mm. Mm.
Place of trying to understand first,
Yeah.
and then not thinking that it's going to be a huge imposition, because 9 times out of 10, before we even come to you with these requests, we have already thought through, like, okay,
Mm.
how can I do this? How can I make this work? What the
Mm.
way that will make this work so I can do my job and follow
Mm.
beliefs? Most of the time, we've already done that work for you. So just ask for our input. If
Yeah.
something doesn't work, we're more than willing to work with you. Uh,
Mm.
so not assuming that we're putting a burden on you. Um,
Yeah.
and then being understanding that, especially in a Christian context, but also for other religions, like our holidays ain't gonna match up. You know,
Yeah.
some Orthodox Christians still go by the old calendar. Christmas is on January 7th.
Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
for us, Easter almost never lands during the Sunday that Protestants celebrate Easter.
Mm.
Easter week, we call it Pascha, is a whole week of celebration
Mm. Mm.
for to request off the entire week so I can go to as many
Yeah.
as I can. Um, to be just kind of understanding that yes, there will be differences, but
Mm.
that doesn't mean that you have to feel like there's this huge burden on you to first of all understand all the differences, because we'll
Yeah.
it's easy for me. I don't need a religious exception to request time off. Now,
Yeah.
if you deny me that time off, I'm going to be like, listen, I'm not going to be here.
Yeah.
Not going to be here because it's a major religious holiday.
So you can decide if you're going to be okay with it
Yeah.
or if we're going to have a conversation after I come back.
Yeah. But, and oftentimes one of the things that I think managers don't realize is that that can really work in your favor. Like if someone needs
Mm.
time, or like for me on Pascha, like I need Pascha,
Mm.
but you know what? I can work Protestant Easter, right?
Yeah.
That's not my holiday,
Yeah.
or if
Yeah.
needs Diwali off, they can usually probably work Christmas. So I would say like just come from a place of not expecting to do all the work. We've already done. It took
Mm.
so much thought and planning and psyching ourselves up to even come to
Yeah.
ask for this exception, because
Yeah.
we know what the normal response is going to be. Like we've encountered it. So
Yeah.
just we're not asking to be treated special. We're not asking for extra rights. We're asking
Mm. Mm.
the same deference you would give to someone who doesn't want to work Christmas, or
Mm.
needs, maybe they want to take Easter off, things like that. It's like that TikTok sound. It really wasn't that big of a deal.
That's
It was.
It never was that serious. Anyone on TikTok, you know what we're talking about. Awesome. Thank you, C, so much for sharing your experience about Orthodox Christianity, about veiling. Thank you all for listening and joining us for this conversation. I will put links to the resources that C mentioned, and any additional ones that she would like to add in the description of the video. So please do make sure to check that out. Support C on her TikTok channel. I will put the link to that as well. Be well, be safe, and until next time.